now. Okay, sorry. So just for the recording, I'll say it again. The title of Vala's paper is Lesbian-south Resonances of Jungian Psychology, a Guardian Practice of Embodied Imagination. And I was saying that I met Vala and also Fran and Andy in this online event that they organized as part of the Lesbianas Jungianas collective in South America. The name of the encounter was Las Lenguas del Alma, which is the tongues of the soul. And I just found them really cool, honestly. So I wanted to for them to be here and to make bridges with that other group so that we can all see what's going on. For me, it was really exciting to learn that there was a group in Spanish. And then, it's always really nice to make space for different viewpoints and different socio-political locations, because they contribute a lot to our understanding of what queerness is and to the Jungian world. So I translated Vala's text and now she's going to present. Thank you very much for being here.
No, thank you, Chema. First, I would like to start by thanking Chema for translating our paper, Minds, and Francesca, who will read it next time, I guess. I don't know. It was very moving, the first part of this meeting, so I have to say something about it. There were some images that stuck with me. One is, I can make Jung my own. I think it was Michael who said that. And you named collage, and I love collaging. It's a form of art that I practice a lot, and it's very reconforting to hear you all. We stopped being at these reunions meetings because of the language barrier, which is conflicting some for us. I think I speak for all four Jungianas, Lesbianas, Lesbian Jungians to say that although we understand English and we speak a little bit of it, it's not the same of speaking in our tongues. So that is what Las Lenguas del Alma was about also, to speak in our tongue. That is not only Spanish, is queerness also. So we share that tongue here, although we don't share our language. So I want you to keep in mind when I read the presentation that it was written for a presentation that I gave with Francesca. So my paper refers to things that you won't understand until you hear Francesca's presentations, okay? Because my part was like an introduction to what she was going to say about resonance. I think earlier today with Dream Matrix, we share resonances. We echo each other's dreams and images. And that is a work we have to keep going. And that is why I'm here, because Chema did the bridging task of translating. I love translating, it's a beautiful work with the words and the sound of the words and the sound of the rhythmics of all text. And he did it beautifully. He did also. I'm sorry about. I'm going to use generic pronouns because my English goes only to there. Okay. Sorry if I misuse them sometimes. So when I read my paper in English, I found myself in a bit of strangeness with it. So take that in count also. I'm not reading myself. I'm reading myself translated by Chema to read it to you, to a different public, because we presented this presentation in a Brazilian group, Thiasos, where Camila she's here. Hi, thank you for being here, Camila. She's a part of Thiasos, which is a Brazilian group whose task is, I'm not sure I'm going to say it okay, but I think they are very critical about some orthodox things on the Jungian world. So we resonated, and we are from South America, and we are living in a neo-fascism governments and neoliberalism countries governments. So this is very hard for me because I'm in Argentina, where the next conference is going to be, that it was mentioned earlier by you, with some critics also, that I'm really glad that they appeared, because I feel like I have to say something because I'm from here and the conference is going to take place here. But I have more to say about this, but I will leave it for later, okay, for the conversation, because I feel like we have to talk about this rigid authority and inequalities and elitism that it's inside our Jungian world. My paper goes a little on that. And also I like to share, I like to thank Stephen, because he was the one who asked for the translation of the presentation, and that was a big surprise for us. And we are really glad to get the chance to continue enriching and reaching out and taking, I don't know, a little bit of the world with us. The greatest thing about us four lesbianas Jungianas is that we made a little world for us, so we can not be alone in each of us countries and Jungians worlds, which are very similar and very different. So this Queer Jungian group is like amplifying and multiplying that feeling of community. So thank you for inviting us back in, because we were like hanging a little out of it. I think we have to fight that. That's why I'm taking classes, English classes again, although I hate it, but I'm gonna try. And Portuguese. We have to try to reach out. Okay, so I'm gonna start reading, but I'll probably get tired because my throat is not very well and English is not my throat. ¿Puedo compartir pantalla? Chema?
Sí, dame un segundo.
What I thought is that I can read the paper while I show it to you, so you can follow me better. And I'm gonna start by showing you a video. When I presented this with Fran to Thiasos group, I did it at the end of the presentation, but I decided to do it the other way around this time. And I will ask you to bajar el volumen, Chema? Volume down?
turn down the volume.
Because it's a little loud, okay? So I don't want you to get your ears hurt. Okay. So I hope you hear it. If you don't, please like type it on the chat. Okay. That's the video I wanted to share with you, the image that the video shows. Then we will talk about it. I'll open the presentation. Okay, tell me, do you see it? Okay. Okay. So I will start reading, and maybe I'll need Chema's help, with a little help from my friends. Well, I would like to share with you today how we have come upon the title of the presentation, which has motivated you to bring your bodies close to your computers or cell phones in order to listen to us. I would also like to invite you to have your bodies well at hand, to amplify your bodily awareness in order to receive with your multiple antennas, holes, skins, and guts the resonances that appear throughout the presentations, seeing as we are not only looking forward to account for a couple of theoretic pathways we have been proven, but also to rehearse a short but not less effective practice of embodied imagination. I will not follow the order of the terms because in this case, and as in any multiplication, and that is what we hope to be doing, multiplying and multiplying ourselves, the commutative property stands, and so the order of the factors doesn't alter the product. When we say Lesbian-south, we make the movement of situating our point of view, something we talked about in the first hour. I didn't want to spoil it, but I thought about it. Sight, the sense we use to conquer objects in the outer world. First, I must say that I borrowed that form of enunciating us from a feminist dyke writer and theorist and a friend, Val Flores. To say lesbian is not to us enunciating a sexual orientation, but a way of positioning ourselves in the context of a neoliberal neo-fascism that strikes our territories with an ever-growing strength. And it is to express from where we think, from where we build knowledge, from where we love, also from where we destroy and hate, from where we make and do not make. That is to say, it is a form of the tongue, of the making visible and invisible, and in order to avoid beating around the bush. It is an epistemology. I refer here to my work, Dyke Epistemologies. I will leave it in the chat. Well, I don't, later I will leave it. Of course, it's in Spanish, okay? But maybe you can use a translator and read it. To our history as psychologists in the southern cone of Latin America, we must add the strong colonialism that impregnates our imagination. I must say here that I also teach history of psychoanalysis and psychology in Argentina, and I'm a bit of a history freak. I like to look at the history of everything. Our collective imaginations have also been colonized. Our way of thinking, narrating, of pathologizing is colonial. From the particular type of Christian monotheistic colonizing that our territories have endured, arise, unsurprisingly, the central problems with which Jungian psychology, and all psychology for that matter, contends today. Here's a couple of words that take a lot of my time to say. Heterocentrism, racism, essentialism, and egocentrism, to name the most important ones, okay? Those of us who are aware of being, participating in some way in the reproduction or production of knowledge have the responsibility, and I don't know if you're familiar with Donna Haraway. I hope you are. Haraway's, she takes the term responsibility and there to roots and says responsibility is the ability to respond to a subject, as opposed to the Christian guilt that stops all capacity of movement. So we have the responsibility, we have the ability to respond of the knowing the epistemological basis of our thoughts, okay? So life conditions are site conditions. A certain position on the sexual and racial division of work generates effects of the production, validation, and legitimization of knowledge. Sorry, I hear myself and it sounds funny sometimes. An epistemology determines an order of the visible and the invisible, says Paul Preciado, that I know some of you are fond of. Determining what exists and what doesn't exist, okay? What can and cannot be known or true. It establishes hierarchies and differences, taxonomies, cartographies, where the objective and the subjective, the real, the imaginary, the scientific and the ideological, the universal and the partial are separated. So it's a way to establish borders, to establish limits, which is another image that came in the dream matrix, borders. The problem is not that there are categories, okay? We know that. The problem is not is to not question them or take them as natural, universal, and or ahistoric. In this way, we do not build knowledge that is more objective or less ideological. On the contrary, the ideological and subjective component worsens it in proportion to how unconscious and not situated the observer is. It doesn't suffice to be good, fun, compassionate, or gay-friendly in order to create a theory that is epistemically well-built from a point of view life that is well-founded and situated on any given coordinates of sex, race, class, geoplanetary condition. To say, as I have heard say in the Jungian world more than once, that we do not have a gender perspective implies that we are being unconscious, therefore that we are not being responsible for the desconocimiento. It's a Gloria Anzaldúa's term. I named her in the chat just a few minutes ago, that it's being produced by the acritical reproduction of certain perspectives, ideas, values about gender. So epistemically, there's no way to not to have a gender perspective. Okay, we all have, some of us make it conscious, some of us take it as granted. So theorizing from and with a responsible gender perspective means, to me, speaking from lesbianism as an epistemology. That doesn't mean that the knowledge is applicable only to lesbians, not even that it emerges from female desire for women, nothing further from the truth. It means entering into a genealogy of feminist thinkers who pointed out that seeing is a question of power, that bodies are not sexually dimorphic, that sexual difference is an epistemology, and that as such, it can and it should be discussed if we want to sustain the kind curiosity of our object of study, which, to cap it all, in our case, is nothing more or less than the soul. I like this about the kind curiosity we have to maintain when we are like losing our our north. I come back to this kind curiosity. How is it possible that sexual division and the scopic identification of body genders not only found their way into this discipline, but were reinforced and reproduced within it with particular violence? With embodied imagination, we make another movement, this time a deepening into our collective constitution. I refer to us as a group here. I mean to say, we first found each other, and the encounter of our lesbian bodies that took place in the Latin American Jungian conference in Colombia in 2018 activated questions in us that were already there. It legitimized complaints, and it repositioned us epistemically, starting a theoretic quest that led us to write papers and facilitate workshops as a group. That is what we've been doing these past 4 years. Of particular importance in this journey was Carolina Guiñez's book Ser lesbiana, un camino de individuación, which would be translated like Being Lesbian, a Path of Individuation, edited in 2019. And all of us, all of our conversations, readings, book trafficking, hairy translations, and varied biases. Our magazine, Fuga, was also a milestone for us, as well as our first conferences in Uruguay back in 2019, before all this madness. Along this road, we have read and studied queer theory with a particular interest in the contentions of Butler and Preciado, as well as the genealogy that preceded queer theory, such as the French lesbian feminism of Monique Wittig and the spiritual Chicano feminism of Gloria Anzaldúa, which I'm particularly, I'm a fan. I'm a Gloria Anzaldúa's fan, and I translated some of her work, and I just love all of her ideas. And I think she has to be more present in the Jungian discussions, archetypal discussions, especially. All ideas that subvert sexual dimorphism, causalism, and heterosexism are central to these lesbian psychologists who were trained in binary, patriarchal, causalistic, heterosexistic, and supposedly neutral and universal psychologies. We come from countries with very different traditions in psychology and psychoanalysis, but all of our psychologists share these qualities. So that is, I think it's important. Within the Jungian world, authors who dare to question the naturalist and essentialist basis of sex and gender are a few, and unsurprisingly are treated as outsiders whose contributions are undervalued or not even mentioned during the academic training. I'm sorry. Those of us gathered here today, I hope this is for you also, have listened to multiple critics of the anima animus model, even from some of the central guardian agents of Jung's work. This is what I was thinking about when the image of rigid authority came, right? The guardian agents of Jung's work. And yet the heterosexual basis of thought, what Wittig calls the heterosexual thinking, remain unaltered. I think this is really important because we hear like, well, it's 2020, 2022. Now there are some things that are old and so they shouldn't be discussed anymore. But I'm not so sure. Maybe they changed some of the presentation, but the idea, the basis of the idea are still heterosexual. The fantasy of the union of the opposites is heterosexual and cis. There is already in psychoanalysis, reflected in analytical psychology, an overly strong emphasis on anatomic sexual differences and unknowing, which is the translation for desconocimiento, of the mechanisms of power that regulate sexuality. Many teachers here, I don't know how that is in your countries, refuse to talk about Foucault because that is sociology, not psychology or politics, and that has nothing to do with what we do. Well, among the authors we've been reading, and thanks to Carolina and her generosity of sharing her investigation, her research for her book. We came across two writers, Susan Mackenzie and Susan Rowland. Probably you know better the later, Susan Rowland. But Susan Mackenzie has 2 or 3 papers that are fundamental for me, at least, to think about this embodied imagination, and the paper that gender has in the constitution of the self and the I. But before moving on to some of the idea of these monstruousness of analytical psychology, how I affectionately like to call them, mostras de la psicología analítica, I would like to tell you what a guardian practice of embodied imagination involves for me. Let us imagine this. Before our eyes rises a tall walled tower, guarded by soldiers who use intellectualist and elitist defenses to defend a treasure whose contents they have forgotten, buried deeply as it is, and whose map they have misplaced. Down here, us inhabitants of the valley and the borders have the responsibility not only to question or to call attention on excesses, epistemic violences, and other injustice carried out by the control tower, but also to protect, care for, guard, and cultivate the imagination. People who do not believe in dragons tend to end up being devoured by one from within, said the incredible Ursula Le Guin. Our imagination doesn't exist outside our body. The body is imagined in as much as the imagination is embodied. Our dragon or dragonesses are practices of the presence of the body that protect the map without forgetting nor tamping down the treasure. Jungian thought is not one. So like Michael said, I can make Jung my own. I mean to say that most papers I read, they talk about 2 Jungs. I would say the multiplicity of Jung, but well, as you wish. Of Jungian thought has already been pointed out. There being at least many of these papers point out that there's one orthodox essentialist and universalist streak that tends to utilize myth to justify the theory, and archetypes as models of behavior that are imposed on the ego. Okay, and others, other streaks, currents that remain open, complex, profound, and partial, and they are different from each other. Both Mackenzie and Rowland coincide in overcoming the limitations of AA, anima animus in Jung, and keeping the Jung that is dedicated to the exploration of alchemy, to the dialogues with the physicist Pauli, to the studies of synchronicity, and to the concern for spirit and matter. The symbolic mythic Jung, the Jung of the subtle body, who invite us to an intermediate space, to the bridge between the physical and the spiritual worlds, a Jung who establishes bridges at the borders. To this Jung, the body is always psychological. There is no other reality than psychological reality. The subtle body is the imagined body. But over these images fall social, cultural, economic pressures that Jung tends to underestimate, probably because of his condition as a white man. This quote is from the book Light in the Dark, from Gloria Anzaldúa also. Was edited in 2015, but she died in 2004. My body is sexed. I can't avoid that reality, although I could change it through transgendering or transsexing. My body is raised. I can't escape that reality. I can't control how other people perceive me. Can't erase my body or the reality of its racedness. For me, being Chicana is not enough, nor is being queer, a writer, or any other identity label I choose or others impose on me. Conventional, traditional identity labels are stuck in binaries, trapped in jaulas. That limit the growth of our individual and collective lives. We need fresh terms and open-ended tags that portray us in all their complexities and potentialities. When I think of moving from a sex-racialized body to a more expansive identity interconnected with its surroundings, I see in my mind's eye trees with interconnected roots, subterranean wells. I think the tree also appeared before. Both Mackenzie and Roland also turned to Hillman's archetypal psychology in order to dismantle, rethink, and reformulate Jungian theory in feminist terms. And so did we as a group. We started studying Hillman a couple of years ago. Archetypal psychology provides a possible source to think Jungian feminisms, in plural, by opposition to the Jungian feminism singular of the movement of the goddess. Especially the treatment of animals, other as an archetype of soul-making and not as a contrasexual, and its polytheism brings variety of consciousness. I think this is very queer about it. The variety of consciousness, styles of existence, and different ways of soul-making, liberating individuation from the stereotypes of an ego in the way to a self. This was very liberating for me as a, as a person, as a lesbian also. How is I'm about to finish. How is gender experienced in the body, and how are these gender embodied feelings elaborated by a consciousness, that is to say, a gender position? That is one of the questions that Mackenzie throws in her paper, like 15 years ago. What relation is there between the experienced body and the imagination, and how may we think of an embodied imagination in addition to an imagined body? We tend to do the second thing a little bit more in our tradition. With these questions, we close the workshop with Carolina in the year 2021. No, a week later, we were to share the conference Las Lenguas del Alma with Chema. And I will close with this. I wanted to end up with the beginning, which connects like Euroboros with what Francesca will share in another meeting. Because if you remember, the presentation was entitled with the word resonance, imaginal resonance. So I left this for the last part of the presentation, because later will be the presentation of Francesca talking about echo, the myth of echo. The term resonance, from the Latin resonantia, from resonare. This is interesting, because when I read the translation, I realized that there is common root, Latin root, with reason. I didn't see that in the Spanish etymology of the word. So something to say about the importance of translation. Many times we, looking at the same word in different languages, we came across other meanings. So the term resonance originates from the field of acoustics and refers, for example, to when a string starts to vibrate and produces a sound after a string has been struck. As the echo, it is the repetition of a sound caused by the reflection of a sonorous wave as it bangs on a rigid surface. In physics, it refers to the phenomenon that is produced when a body that is capable of vibrating is submitted to the action of a periodic force whose period of vibration coincides with the period of vibration characteristic of said body. I'm sorry about maybe it's a little complicated, but I think it's important because it has to do with the practice we're doing here, okay? In these circumstances, the body vibrates, increasing in progressive form the amplitude of the movement after each of the successive uses of the force. So like a wave, okay? Last quote from Lewin, also big fan. All living beings are oscillators. We vibrate. Amoeba or human, we pulse, move rhythmically, change rhythmically, we keep time. You can see in the amoeba under the microscope vibrating in frequencies on the atomic, the molecular, the subcellular, and the cellular levels. That constant, delicate, complex throbbing is the process of life itself made visible. We become synchronized among each other all the time. Let us synchronize, let us multiply, let us be the healing of the wound. Thank you very much. That's it. Please open your microphone so we can share.
Thank you, Vala. I think before we start the conversation, I would just really like to say that it has been very enlightening to me to have conversations with Vala and with Fran. It has made me realize how colonized my thought is and how colonized my psyche also is. And then it is really nice to feel like I'm imitating Jung, but not in the sense of like parroting him, but of building bridges, because the Jung that Vala was talking about, this other Jung, this Jung of the subtle body, is a Jung that had an eye for nuance and who kind of like linked and interweaved things. So I am very thankful for this space and for this presentation. And with that, Stephen, I think you wanted to say something, right?
Nothing substantial, just to kind of be very effusive. It was wonderful, really wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Yes, thank you so much. I was deeply moved and intrigued and hungry for being able to slowly take it in, read it, and almost wishing to see it both in Spanish and in English, even though I don't speak Spanish, to sort of take in the rhythm of it. And I don't know if that's possible for those to be shared with us.
The Spanish presentation is in YouTube.
Okay.
I will look it up for you.
Wonderful. To take in and metabolize and digest.
Yeah.
As Chema said, to get beyond my own boundaries.
Thank you for being so receptive, because I didn't know if you were going to, I don't know, like really listen to what we wanted to say.
I found it really exciting because it feels like some of where my thought has been trying to go, but you gave me some language and I think energy and image, watching the cells. Thank you for beginning with that. It just felt like it opened up my heart and my body, my whole being to yes. And I feel like I'm going to be able to think better. Think more clearly, with my Jung. And so it feels like a real gift that I've been given, because I feel like I was getting there on my own, but I couldn't go further. And you're helping me. There's that bridge. You're helping me go where I was trying to go, and I didn't even know all of where I was trying to go. So thank you.
Wow.
And by the way, I think that's what resonance is all about.
Yes.
About like echoing each other, and our thoughts can only go so far, and the language can only go so far. So it's really nice to be enriched by those other tongues.
Yes. And saying that, I remember your dream, and something I thought when you were telling it. Fran ended her presentation by saying that it's really hard to say this in another language, so give me a moment, okay? So it's not that heterosexual people or thinkers are denying our experiences. Sometimes they are openly, but sometimes they are not. But we have no one to resonate with and to amplify. That's why I ended up with that image of resonance as something that repeats and gets in a rhythm that amplifies. If we don't continue with these meetings, if George and everyone who's like making them possible in a rhythm, in a way, in a like a symphonic, right? It doesn't live. That's the cell, right? It's like we can think about some things of our identities and our awkwardness. What did Michael said? He said like we grew into this. Like we felt first awkward, like discomfort, but we didn't have the words to say what that discomfort was. And we, like queer people, tend to think it's our fault, and maybe there's something wrong about us, because so many people are saying that feminine and masculine are this and that, and you can't identify fully with that. It's your problem. And then to move from that non-conformity to a creative way of thinking of yourself and imagining yourself and others, it's a movement that it can only be done with others. That's what I've learned with Lesbianas Jungianas. I couldn't think of this. I couldn't put these words for you to understand if there weren't for these crazy people, Fran and Andy and Gato, who resonated with me, and well, here we are. So I think Fran wants to say something.
Hola, no, it's me. It's Sandy, hello. I'm a part of Lesbian Jungian, but I am going to speak in Spanish for my friend Vale and Chema. And I hope maybe you can translate or not, because it's not important. But solamente quería decir, bueno, mandarte un abrazo desde Lima, Vale. Y solamente decir que para mí es muy increíble estar escuchándote, porque esto es raro, estar en esta Matrix, escuchándote desde Lima, pero quiero rescatar tu condición de punta de flecha para llevarnos lejos y alto, y además resaltar el valor de las resonancias, porque hace un tiempo empezamos a hablar y este eco ahora ya está en todos lados, así que thank you, Vala.
Besos, Vale. Bueno, Andy se va en un ratito de Lima, estuvo coincidentemente por aquí, así que yo me ausentaré un segundo, pero luego vuelvo. Te mando un abrazote, querida.
Bye, Andy. I think it is worthwhile to maybe try to translate as much as I can. But what I understand is basically that Andy is thanking Vala for being a narrowhead for their group, for the Lesbianas Jungianas, and opening up space in different and like more varied places. And then also Andy made this comment about how they started speaking some while ago, and now there's all of these echoes, which is very moving, which is basically what I think we are all trying to do from our own positions. So
Exactly.
thank you, Vala. Also, it is very, very exciting to be able to witness all of this.
Thank you. I would like to know, well, if you have questions, and it intrigues me if you knew the authors I mentioned, the two Susans, Mackenzie and Roland. Did you know their work?
Yeah, that Mackenzie
Roland.
paper, it's really amazing. And it's, you know, if you read the whole JAP, that paper really stands out as one of the few.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes. Why is no one else saying these things?
Yes, totally.
Which
So-
paper is it that you're referring to?
2006. I'll see if I can find a copy of it.
There's another one from 2010. And there, after that, I couldn't find any.
Roland papers?
Roland papers. Roland wrote a book
Right,
in 2002 that it's called Jung, a Feminist Revision.
Right. So the
Where-
other papers, the 06 and 10, are Mackenzie's papers?
Queer in Gender. And
Okay.
I can send them to you in the group. But
Yeah,
you
maybe-
didn't know them. I'm
Maybe we
guessing.
can
It's
maybe we
safe
can
for
put
Stefan.
together like a list of references and put it on
Yes.
the Google group, on the message boards, and the link for the presentation in Spanish and other things.
Yeah.
I think George, then Sarah and Douglas would like to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo what everybody else has said, being really grateful to have you, being grateful for this technology that kind of like allows us to negate these kind of different positions that we're in geographically, right? It's really, really wonderful. I wanted to, so yeah, I mean, I heard of most of the authors, but I decided I want to read more Anzaldúa after this. So thank you for encouraging me for that, because
Right.
you know, it sounds really, really interesting. Something that I wanted to ask both you, Vala, and anybody else here who might want to say something about this, is something about the goddess, the idea of the goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And where I understand that there's other views that kind of say that this is equally kind of problematic as an idea, because it's basically continuing this kind of gender essentialism. You know, I remember that there was a particular kind of gathering of, I think it was analysis and activism, when Susan Rowland just unmuted herself and said, the feminine is coming, the goddess is coming, or something like that. And I think Andrew Samuels kind of said, yes, but this is a problematic thing around gender essentialism and all that. I mean, what's interesting, of course, to me is that we live in a patriarchal world, and that therefore, to me, it makes perfect sense to for this kind of valorizing of the feminine, even though I understand that it's very problematic to categorize things as masculine and feminine. You know, this is why I worship drag queens, and I worship women's, you know, artists and all of that, really. But I wonder whether, you know, particularly because it's a lesbian group as well, whether this idea of the goddess is also seen as problematic, or not, or you feel that actually we need to defend that position and yeah.
No. You just answer your own question, George, I think. I don't know if you're familiar with Monique Wittig feminism. She, in 1970 or 71 or early 70s, said lesbians are not women, and most of the women in the audience in a feminist conference stood up and walked out because they felt offended by this idea. We are called lesbianas jungianas, not women jungianas, and that is that is something to think about. And nothing to say about those who feel women's and who feel like there's an essence in that and need to defend it, but it's not our task to defend an essence that is being so harmful to some of the bodies, to some of our bodies. The idea of the feminine is not bad. It's not bad. The masculinity also. They are not bad or good. Patriarchal societies tend to assume that masculine is for one kind of body and feminine is for another kind of body. That is when this problem starts, not with feminine and masculine, but with the assumption that some bodies are essentially masculine or essentially feminine. And then we have all the problems that we have. So Guy Rubin, another queer theorist, early queer theorist, said that psychoanalysis was feminist theory, frustrated feminist theory, because Freud could see that young humans are neither masculine or feminine. They are polymorphous. I don't know how to say it in English. Sexually diverse. And it's only what?
Polymorphously perverse.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. So only after the Oedipus complexes, they emerge as young girls and young boys. So what Freud couldn't see and Jung either is that there's a problem there. There's no problem with being gay, lesbian, trans, or anything. Like, why does someone become a woman or a man? that is a problem that no one could see after, not until at least the critics of the 70s, and well, later on until queer theory. So why are we talking about this, and why we are against somehow of the feminists of the feminists of the goddess, like if feminism would be like internalization of the women? Is that because it's harmful for a lot of identities, and it's equally violent. This is a debate, okay? So that is our political and sexual position, because we have a task as psychologists, I think, of opening diversity, like Chema says, like opening up the ways of someone to be able to imagine herself, himself, theyself. So it's problematic when someone says that, like, because you have an uterus, you have to be nourishing, or I don't know, like connected to the earth in some way. I find it violent.
Sarah? Oh, sorry. Thank you, Vala.
No.
George.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say too, from a personal perspective, that I feel very seen today by your presentation and by hearing about your group. And I just want to say how important that is for me, as well as it sounds like it was for you. And maybe I need to start taking Spanish classes so we can talk more together, even more. But thank you so much for being willing, and for Chema for helping with some of the bridging and border landing to make this happen, because there is a unique lesbian identity that I think in some ways always feels to me, in using the term queer, that gets a little bit erased. For me personally, and I'm not trying to speak for anyone else, I also claim the term queer, but lesbian is the best one. So the fact that your group has that in its name is really, really affirming to me. So thank you very much. I had a couple of questions because I found those Mackenzie papers recently. Does anyone know Susan Mackenzie? Do you know how to contact her?
I tried to do it. but I didn't get an answer.
Oh, I couldn't
Well,
find
I
any way
use
to catch it.
Mhm.
Okay.
We
'Cause
should
it
try
would
to
be
get
really-
in touch.
Yeah, I couldn't find an email or a phone number or anything. It sounds like she practices somewhere in the northeastern part of the United States, but
Yes,
I
in
don't know.
Vermont, I think.
Yeah. The other question I just had before I look it up is the Borderlands book or the Queena's book from 2019, are either of those in English?
No,
Okay.
no, it's in Spanish, but I think that it's a good thing for now.
Yeah.
But maybe Caro can think about translating. Borderlands is in English, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get that. I thought that you were asking about Carolina Guiñez's book, Borderlands of Gloria Anzaldúa. Gloria Anzaldúa is a Chicana who wrote mostly in English, but she uses a mixture of her tongues that are very diverse. So I would be very interested for you to read her, because she had a kind of a Jungian formation, archetypal formation. No, you say training. I don't know if you know Mary Watkins from the Pacifica. Okay, so they were kind of friends, or they knew each other, and all these archetypal influence and thinking, it's very deep in Anzaldúa's thinking, and I'm like trying to do a work of giving her work to be known and read. So I'm glad I'm I'm expanding Anzaldúa's work here too.
Just one final thing I have to say, as long as we're being embodied, I love all the uses of the word tongue.
Okay. Yes.
That's beautiful.
Total.
Thank you. Douglas, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I can quite capture everything that I want to share, but thank you so much, Vala, and thank you, Chema, for facilitating and making this possible. I'm really, really appreciative of how important it is to hear voices from the global South, that there is something just simply on a qualitative, energetic level that feels very special, very unique and important to include. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm curious about a point that may seem like a small one, but it caught my attention on page 3 of your paper, where there was a line about the imagination being inside us. And I get really curious about where we situate the imagination.
Inside us?
Yeah, I thought there was something about the imagination is inside us. And I couldn't remember more this far from hearing the paper, because it's a lot to digest.
Mm-hmm.
But,
maybe the quote of Le Guin, who talks about the dragons from within.
Oh, I wonder if that's where it is. Because I have been tending to think in my own work about Hillman quite a bit. I was very glad that you include Susan Rowland and Hillman. I really have a deep love for that pedigree. And I think more and more about the imagination as being something autonomous.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to, you know, where do we situate the imagination?
Mm-hmm.
And then, to me, it's much more liberating to allow our imagining of gender to be something outside ourselves. That I keep coming back to an interior imagination as a colonized imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot about the benefits of an imagination that exists outside my mind and my person. And I think that that ties in also with some of the very interesting stuff that both Hillman and Susan have written about Dionysus. And I think about Dionysus as a queer, as a kind of queer deity, a queer body, a queered imaginal body. And there's one piece that Hillman wrote, it's in the uniform edition, where he gets into the Dionysian approach to the body is to depersonalize it and dismember it in a way that each part of the body can speak with its own psychology. And that's something that I found very helpful. So those are just a few ideas that have been cooking, precipitated or stimulated by your paper.
Right. I'm very glad. But I think I agree with you totally. So I think maybe the understanding that is something from inside the imagination is from the Ursula Le Guin quote that says, "People who do not believe in dragons tend to end up being devoured by one from within." And if you read the whole essay where she says that, or if you know her work, she's very archetypal in that way. She's very Hillmanian. Like, she understands the imagination as a capacity, human capacity, that it's underestimate and put aside in the American society and all Western society. So not to get in touch with that that feel of our experience is to feel more and more weak and dead. I'm remembering, I'm sorry, I just made a connection with in my brain, but I know it's late, so I start to thank you all for staying. I don't know how much time we do have, Chema, but I remember that we were going to read a poem. I totally forgot.
We have some 10 minutes, and maybe we can
go
over it a little bit, but more or less.
I thought it was, we were like...
No, it's just at 12:30, so it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe Mauricio, do you want to speak, and then we can read the poem, and then at the very end, George has something to announce for the next meeting. So we may go a little bit over time, but if you're okay with staying, it'll be a couple of minutes probably.
Thank you. Well, it's very brief. I would like to say two things generally. I think it's very interesting, the political approach that you have. Very, very interesting. And this fact of the global south, the voice from the global south, it deeply resounds with me. Also in my work, I'm doing everything global north, global south. If I go to Washington, I go to Buenos Aires. I went to Brussels, then I went to South Africa in the last few weeks. I had several missions. So just to say that I totally understand, not totally, I totally support this. And one thing I said personally, I'm very thankful because I already said maybe in some other meeting that for me as a gay man growing, while I was trying to understand myself better, there was this vision of a lesbian anima in my dreams. And now this presentation today helped me to shape it better, the plurality of lesbian. Lesbian is not a single word, it's a pluralistic word. So this, I'm very, very thankful for this to our guests and to you, Chema.
Thank you. I'm very...
Yes, thank you again to everyone, especially Vala. I think I would very quickly like to share that, as I was saying, I came to realize recently how colonized my imagination is. And I think, I'm not sure if some of you know or might relate to this, but when you, at least in Mexico, I don't know how it is in Argentina and in Peru, but it seems sometimes as if everything European or everything American, and especially the language, like English, like the more you know, the better you are. And it has to do with class, and it has to do with power. And it's I think, for me, very important to make space for us, for example, in this group, and especially people who may not be so fluent in English, who have other languages, because it's sometimes very intimidating, and it has to do with those rigid authorities, guardians who allow people to enter or not into the Jungian world, which is like very fertile, but sometimes it's difficult to access. So it's nice, and I really appreciate from all of you who do not speak Spanish, like the effort to like stay with the discomfort, because sometimes, and I don't know, this is like a bit of a sidetrack, but like here in Mexico recently, there's a lot of people from the US who have been moving here, and from other countries who maybe speak French or other languages, German. And it seems like there's this expectation that everyone else will adapt. So we will all learn English and then like translate and make all of this effort, and not necessarily the other way around when the languages are, and I don't know, this is a long story. Spanish is also a really colonial language, I guess, but I just wanted to make that comment, like to say how important and how relevant it feels for me that we make this bridge. And I hope that more people will maybe want to bridge out in other directions. If you know other cool people who are doing things in other tongues or in other, you know, geopolitical locations, it would be really cool to expand and amplify. So thank you again. Do you want, ¿quieres que lea el?
Si querés, sí.
Bueno, Vala wrote a poem that I found really beautiful. If you want to listen to it in Spanish, it's at the end of the recording in the YouTube channel. And I translated it. And so maybe what I'll do is I'll also share the screen so you can see the words, and I'll read it. But this is Vala's text. Oh no, wait. I think I have the wrong one. Give me a second. I'm sorry, I have my windows mixed up. Sorry, I think I have it now. So can you see a Microsoft Word window that says the text will be heard in the video? Is that it? Okay, sweet. The weave is a cosmological activity. It creates worlds, it repairs injured parts and imagines havens. I partake in the weave with my human and non-human fibers. I place them there, available for with others. We weave, it weaves itself. I witness. To regenerate, this organic tissue requires cells that are specific to this tissue. And within the vast world we inhabit, we all occupy a particular place, unique and unrepeatable, as specific cells, as problematic knots, within, without the borders that cut through continents, always in motion. A field of research and care of the soul, of the twisted multiverse of our identities that as a river we gradually occupy, temporarily, in activism, in convictions and struggles. I mean to say, we are already a part. A woven epistemology is to weave, and is also the weave from which theory is created, from our experiences. And we leave the problem of inclusion to the spaces with villagers who live on the other side, those who successfully disentangled the Oedipus complex, who have no maternal, no paternal complexes, who arrived at the predestined reproductive site of neurosis, who transitioned from clitoral to vaginal orgasms, who understood the difference between a penis and the phallus, who understood the sexual difference of bodies, those who preferred to be normal. I want thinking that thinks multiple thoughts, unexpected and spontaneous. An elastic bag that contains the imagination without corseting it. A shape of knowledge that is desirous of questions that disturb, that is curious for novelties and attracted by ludicrous connections. I long for an interwoven way of knowing, an in-between, an inter, a trans, a within. I feel that to be a lesbian in this world, establishing connections with others is a question of life and death. The care of my soul is at stake. It is at stake who tells our stories, our dreams, our frustrations, our images. I perceive the lack of air, of pneuma, of kindness and attention, the over-adaptation to correct forms, the death of the soul. We can all witness it. Some of us have been afflicted by it. With panic, we have fled. I need for us to find each other and to speak with our tongues, to be rid of external agendas and to begin making theory with what is already in our tongues. I desire a knowing that connects the connected. I ask, who and how can we connect with in order to weave and repair tissues? What rhythm do we need in order to sustain other ways of living, of imagining and dying in this world? Movement transforms into a dance. A pulse that walks with breathing, enters a rhythm which sells us, a dynamic harmony, a happy compass that ends in the ecstatic reunion, spellbound. I dance and I imagine how we have fun and we get to know each other in this doing being. Pulse, we speak in our tongues. We weave worlds as we make soul without blood ties or institutional loyalties. As one thinks, as one loves. We make soul with our bodies as the strands of the weave that supports, cares for, sets in motion. I mean to say, let us try. The soul calls to us. It claims us. It burns us in our tongues.
Gracias, Chema. Gracias. Gracias, everyone. It's a lot.
See, I know, it's very moving. Thank you, Vala, and thank you everyone else.
Thank
As
you
always,
all.
This is very, I mean, it makes me very happy that this group exists.
Yes, I'm gonna start participating in next meetings.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now. And